Okay, the study session of the Aurora City, study session for the Aurora City Council for Monday, February 23rd, 2026, called to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Kaufman?
Here.
Councilmember Andrews?
Here.
Councilmember Bergen?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Coombs?
Present.
Councilmember Gardner? Councilmember Hancock?
Here.
Councilmember Horton?
Here.
Councilmember Jackson? Here. Councilmember Lawson? Councilmember Medina?
Here.
Councilmember Wiles?
Here.
There's no mayor's update. Okay. Item 1A1. This is, I talked to our district attorney, Amy Padden from the 18th Judicial District about giving a presentation that she, I think, very effectively gave to the Aurora chapter of the NAACP over the CERT process. District Attorney, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, Mayor, thank you for having me. As the mayor mentioned, I, along with sometimes Sheriff Brown or other people from the Sheriff's Office, have been giving presentations to just further explain the critical incident response team process. So this is our process that we have if there is an officer involved shooting. So I'm the district attorney for the 18th Judicial District. We serve only Arapahoe County, so we cover the part of Aurora that is south of Colfax, essentially. So, for example, if there was a shooting north of Colfax, that would be in the 17th Judicial District in Adams County. And they have a similar but slightly different protocol. And so, what is CERT? So CERT is Critical Incident Response Team, and it's a group of investigators from various police departments within the 18th Judicial District, so within Arapahoe County. And they work together, and also investigators from my office. I have numerous investigators in my office. I essentially have a detective squad in my office. And so we all get together when there's a critical incident and respond. And so in our district, the CERT investigates where an officer uses deadly force or there's serious bodily injury. And the investigators look into the facts about what happened. And so we've listed here the various law enforcement agencies that contribute people to the scene. And it's important to note that once there is a critical incident report, let's say there was an Aurora police officer involved in the shooting, Aurora Police Department will not take the lead on that CERT investigation. So we're trying to, have a bit of separation. So, for example, the Sheriff's Office might take the lead on that investigation, or Littleton Police Department, or Englewood Police Department, something like that. So we don't have the law enforcement agency conducting the investigation itself. And actually, before I get to this slide, essentially what will be going on is if there is a fatality or a serious injury involving an officer's use of force, we respond right away. So, and I personally get a phone call. I've come down to APD in the middle of the night. If I'm in town, I come myself. Attorneys from my office will come, investigators, and then other members of the CERT team. And so we're on scene right that day, right when it happens, to start the investigation. And the reason we do things this way is because we have state law that requires, first of all, that we establish a CERT team, and that we post the protocol for the CERT team on our website, which we have on, it's on my office's website. It's CODA18.gov. And we do have protocols there. They are protocols that were passed at the end of the last administration, so we are in the process of updating those, and we hope to have those updated fairly soon. And so the CERT teams were established to ensure independent, thorough, and transparent investigation following critical incidents involving law enforcement. So officer-involved shootings, there will also be an in-custody death, or other critical uses of force resulting in serious bodily injury or death. And again, as I mentioned, we have these different law enforcement agencies. All will have individuals respond, and then one law enforcement agency will designate as the lead investigator, but it will not be the agency that's employing the officer who was involved in the shooting. So they go through this process, they investigate the facts, they will interview witnesses, they will take photos, they will look at flock cameras, body cameras, all those sorts of things. But they're just focused on determining what the facts are, what evidence is available. After that occurs, then they will give a presentation, the CERT team will give a presentation to my office of those facts and evidence, and then our office takes that under review. And then once we review all those facts and evidence, and my folks will look at everything again with a fresh eye. We will review the body-worn camera. We will listen to the witness interviews so that we are getting a full picture. We're not solely relying on any summaries that are conducted by the CERT team. And then the final decision is whether or not charges are going to be filed. So there could be a couple different things going on when we have an officer-involved shooting. First of all, let's say that the individual who is shot at survives, or maybe a criminal investigation into whether that individual was involved in some sort of criminal activity. That individual could be charged with a crime. So that would be done by the employing agency, because that's a crime that occurred within that jurisdiction. Then there's the CERT process. The sole purpose of the CERT process is to determine whether or not charges are going to be filed against that officer who just charged this weapon. And that's the only role that we have, but we solely make that decision about whether or not to file charges. In addition to that, there could be a separate internal affairs investigation going on, and that will take place by the employing law enforcement agency because it needs to. It's an internal affairs investigation. That is separate from CERT, and there are very specific protocols about what can be used in which, and so we have to make sure that we are following our protocols to the T so that we don't impact adversely the internal affairs investigation. So again, the CERT collects evidence and facts, documents that information, provides an independent investigation, and ensures transparency. CERT does not decide whether the officer was right or wrong. They don't review police department policies. They don't make the determination about whether criminal charges were filed, and they don't make legal conclusions. And so, already touched on this a little bit, but the evidence collection starts usually right away, right after we get notice of the shooting or whatever other force has been used. Start right away collecting body camera, physical evidence, witness statements, and things like that. And we'll start to review it, right there. I've, been at Aurora Police Headquarters at 3 a.m. after a shooting, and we are watching the body cam right there and then. We are pulling the flock cameras that might be available and watching it right there and then. There could be forensic experts from outside the involved agencies. They will secure the scene to preserve accuracy. And then the officer will be interviewed by the CERT investigators. And again, these interviews are voluntary, but they can become formal in some cases. But we also have to make sure we're following the protocols and we don't interfere with the internal affairs investigation that's going on with that. Oops. And then again, once it's collected, the facts are reviewed to me, and then our office makes the final decision about whether the officer's actions were justified or whether we're going to go forward and file charges. And CERT doesn't review policy. We're not going to determine whether an agency is in compliance with the consent decree. All we're doing in CERT is determining whether criminal charges will be filed. And it's important to have a process like this to ensure that we have transparency, accountability, and community trust. So by separating the investigation from the employing law enforcement agency, we can serve all these goals. And by making sure that the CERT team is only presenting the evidence and that my office and me ultimately is making the final decision, we serve these goals of the CERT process. So once the process is complete and the information has been presented and we make the decision on whether or not to file charges, if we decide not to file charges, we must publish a letter and make it available on our website, explain the basis for our decision. And those are available on our website. Again, it's coda18.gov. You can go back and look at the ones for my administration as well as administrations previously. And these are detailed letters. They typically will have photographs in there, maybe still shots from body camera. We will summarize the relevant interviews. You know, they're typically 10 plus pages long, and they go through a detailed summary of the evidence and analysis of the decision not to file charges in that case. If we decide to refer a case to the grand jury, at that point in time, we release a statement that the matter has been referred to a grand jury. And just so folks know, in Colorado, we are a complaint and information state for the most part. So most felony charges, the police officers send reports to our office. We decide to file charges, and we go in and file the charges through the court's electronic filing system. This is different than, for example, the federal system or some states like New York that use a grand jury. Every case goes through the grand jury in those jurisdictions. So we are different, but we do have grand jury. We have a grand jury sitting at all times, and so we can refer a case to the grand jury for essentially two purposes. We could refer a case to the grand jury for the grand jury to conduct some additional investigation. The grand jury can issue subpoenas for documents. The grand jury can have witnesses come in and testify under oath. Or if the case is worked up already, we already have evidence, we can present the case to the grand jury to make a decision about whether to issue an indictment, which is called a true bill. And then in the case, if it's the case that a officer-involved shooting is referred to the grand jury and the grand jury does not return a true bill, then the grand jury issues and publishes a report explaining the basis for its decision.
Oh, real quickly.
Yes.
So,
Mayor.
Amy, why do you, so it's your discretion, right, whether to refer to the grand jury or that you can go forward with charges? Give me just some criteria as to why you would make the decision if you were to make the decision to go to a grand jury.
Yeah, you know, it really depends. Again, we use the grand jury pretty rarely in Colorado because most cases are just filed by complaints and information. But, you know, for example, we could use a grand jury if there's a witness who didn't talk to the police and we'd like to get them, and doesn't want to talk to our investigators, and we'd like to get them under subpoena to get some information from them, get their testimony.
Okay.
It could be if we're having a hard time getting some documents that we think we need for some reason, the grand jury can issue subpoenas to get documents. So we could use it in that way in kind of investigative phase. And it could be if we think it's a difficult case and we think that the community through the grand jury should weigh in on whether charges should be filed or not, then we could present an indictment for the grand jury to consider. Yes.
Yes, Councilmember Horton.
Thank you, DA Patton, for the presentation. Question around engaging with witnesses with the CIRT process. What is the typical outreach efforts for identified witnesses of an incident?
It's usually the typical process. They try to get the names of all individuals who are on site who may have been eyewitnesses to that case. They will interview them that day if those witnesses are willing to be interviewed then. If not, sometimes they will follow up and try to see if the witness will come in later for an interview and things like that. So it's typically, the same investigative techniques that we would use normally, or that law enforcement would use normally, to try to see who all was there, particularly for eyewitnesses, and interview them. Obviously, people they're not required to talk to the police, so that could be one way we might use a grand jury if there's someone who didn't want to talk to police, but we would like to get their testimony. That would be one use of the grand jury.
And so just 2 points of clarification, if you don't mind. Sorry, Mayor. For the witnesses, so that the witnesses on scene, their names are provided from the local law enforcement agency to the CIRT team, or how does one get those names
Yeah.
in the moment, those who are there?
It could be a combination because this is all kind of happening at the same time. I
Right.
mean, usually the law enforcement agency who is employing the officer will be there first because it happened in their
Right.
jurisdiction. But right away, within, 45 minutes to an hour, more investigators are responding from the other agencies. And so ideally, those interviews will be conducted by the CERT team and not the law enforcement, the employing law enforcement agencies, unless
In the moment, yeah.
unless there's some reason why it needs to happen right away. Maybe there's some sort of exigent circumstances that they need some information right away.
All right. And then the last clarifying question was, you said sometimes they'll outreach. What constitutes of when they do or when they don't, after the initial outreach to a witness who may have at first declined?
So I think it would depend on how important they think that witness's testimony is, but I think in most cases they do reach out again if the witness doesn't want to speak to at the time of the incident, but they think that witness has important information, they would reach out again.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
City Attorney.
DA Penn, just real quick. So, elephant in the room is Median Schaffner has come to City Council several times and says that the CERT team has refused to interview her and meet with her. I've seen the report. I've seen her statements in there. Are you at liberty to say whether or not they were able to interview her or not as part
I
of the process?
can't say that. I can't talk about any specific cases,
Right.
and that one is still in the process. So I can't
Right.
talk about that case in
Okay.
particular. Yes.
Councilmember Bergen.
Well, I guess to follow up, but if you have a written statement from a witness, is that acceptable?
It would all depend on the circumstances. It may be that a written statement is fine, but the investigators may say, oh, you know what, I want some more information about this thing the witness said, and therefore we're going to go speak with them
Okay.
again.
And then
So-
just on the grand jury, and I have always heard this, I don't know if it's true, but that whenever it goes to a grand jury, it's almost always going to have an indictment. Is that fair
So
to
that-
say?
Yeah, people probably heard the saying a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. Yes. So that's not the way grand juries work in Colorado. And no grand jury that I have ever seen in Colorado operates that way. Again, because in Colorado, we don't take all our cases to the grand jury. So like in New York, they are just hearing case after case after case after case. We may give the grand jury one case a month or maybe even less than that. And so, I have found in my practice that our grand juries take their duties very seriously. They know they are an important part of the process. They look at things very carefully, and they fulfill the duties that they have agreed to do under law. So I think our grand juries are very thoughtful, and I think a lot of it is that we just have such a different process than states like New York or the federal system.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up. So, again, we don't have to talk about a particular case, but if somebody was a witness, it's the CERT team that would take the responsibility and interview them, not the employing agency.
Yes.
Is that correct? I
That
want to
is
make sure it's clear that Aurora PD and one of our OIS would not be reaching out to a witness to ask for their interview. It would be the CERT team, whoever's in charge of that.
Oh, okay.
Is that right?
That's how it would typically work. There may once in a while be an exception, but once the CERT process has started, it's the CERT team's investigation. They would be the ones reaching out to and they would be conducting those interviews. It would not be the employing law enforcement agency.
Okay, good to know. Great to know. Yes. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm really curious, and maybe I missed it at the very beginning, but the process in which CERT gets alerted, like does a regular investigation take place, or does everybody pause until CERT can get there to do an investigation? Just like this, I don't want evidence to get tampered with and things like that.
Yes, no, that's a good point. Sometimes these things happen so quickly. Sometimes there's certain things that have to be done at the scene. And sometimes, but we respond as quickly as possible. There's essentially an alert that goes out, and whoever's available responds. So sometimes we get, 40, 50 investigators responding, and then we determine who is going to go do what, who's going to go to the scene, who's going to interview people that may have, come back to headquarters and things like that. So it really depends. We try to get the CERT team there as quickly as possible, but sometimes things have to happen right away.
Great. And then a follow-up. Who's alerting the CERT team? Like, let's say there was excessive force or any of the, qualifying factors. Is it Aurora Police Department that's alerting that there needs to be an investigation? Who does that?
Yeah, they would do the initial alert to the CERT team, and then the CERT team would let their people know. So, for example, someone from my office, whoever draws a short straw, calls me at 3 a.m. and says, get out of bed.
Mayor, if I can, so, Councilman, so I'll tell you, when I was over public safety, so Megan's role, when I was over public safety, so there's two ways that we make sure the CERT is notified.
Okay.
One is an alert goes out, they call it a critical incident response text, right? That goes out to my office, goes out to the chiefs, that an OAS has occurred. When I became the deputy over public safety, I started coming to OIS scenes, and Megan does do that now. So the first thing that Megan asks when she shows us, has the CERT team been notified? So she's doing the analysis based on the statute about whether or not it's death or serious bodily injury, where a CERT team would be called in, and it's done very quickly. So if the police department hasn't taken care of it, my office is tasked with notifying the CERT team. So I want to make sure City Council is aware that, yes, we have a double-checked standard here that if the police don't do it, we will do it because we're going to follow the statute. So that is, anything else, Megan, that?
No, and I think in the OIS context, those are pretty black and white. It's statutory. It's pretty much automatically happening. And then, you might have those other cases if you had a pursuit or something where there might be a decision that had to be made, whereas we would, speak internally and ask Amy's team, is it appropriate for you to respond based on the factors that are available now? And so that's how sometimes the process gets a little bit murkier in those types of situations. But an OIS is going to have a pretty standard response in that.
And we've made contact with the CERT team saying, hey, we've got this scenario, and the CERT team has made the decisions like, hey, we're not going to come out on that because we don't think it meets the requirements. So we again, and not because of the consent decree, not because of anything else, because of transparency of the police department, we overly advise the CERTs to make sure we don't get the allegation that we did not call when we should have.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Amy.
Yep.
What's serious definition, correct, just of serious bodily injury? Where is that threshold?
Oh, it's, I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but it could be like someone's grazed by a bullet. It could be if someone's injured with a taser or pepper spray, actually has an injury from that, things of those nature, yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, thanks. Just great presentation. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Really helped. Yeah, really helped clarify it. Are there any issue updates? Seeing none, is there any objection to moving the consent calendar forward, item number 2A through 2F? Seeing none, the consent calendar will move forward, item number 2A through 2F. Item number 5A, educational presentation on oil, gas, and mineral leasing in Aurora. Mayor Pro Tem Coombs.
Mayor, thanks. I just had requested this because we now have a different policy landscape that we're navigating. In the past, we were able to be force pooled for mineral leasing, and we are now not able to be force pooled for mineral leasing, so that changes the information and recommendations that we receive. In addition, we have numerous new council members who have not been through mineral leasing negotiations. So Jeffrey Moore is here to give us a presentation.
Jeffrey Moore, you got the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, Jeffrey Moore, Manager of the Energy and Environment Division. Thank you so much, Mayor and council members. I'm going to share some information on oil and gas and mineral leasing.
Oh, Mayor, I'm sorry. Are we doing this before the consent calendar? Because there were items that were supposed to be discussed.
We just did we've done the consent calendar.
We had items from Pfizer that were disagreement between the two members present. So we were supposed to talk about those. It should not have been on consent. I apologize.
There was no objection when I asked.
Sorry, I was
City
taking
Attorney, where else
other
can she
notes.
bring that issue? He's not here.
Okay, I guess we'll just bring it up during miscellaneous, because there were items that were not agreed on
Okay, well,
by the members present at the
We need to
meeting.
move forward right now. Please proceed.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. We'll cover 5 topics this afternoon, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions. We'll talk about authority for oil and gas operations, some facts and figures in Aurora, oil and gas exploration concepts, some risk topics, and then we'll end with mineral leasing. The state, of course, has all authority over oil and gas operations in the state through the ECMC, the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. You'll hear that acronym a lot. CDPHE also regulates air emissions from oil and gas operations. On the local side, cities and counties such as Aurora have limited authority to regulate surface impacts in a reasonable manner. That's in Colorado revised statutes, and only for wells whose surface location is inside their jurisdictional boundaries. Now, even though surface impacts is our only area of review, that does constitute a large number of items. And when we have permit applications that come through, we review everything that's on the screen there. So it's a very robust review process. We have 2 legal mechanisms that we manage operations in the city. The first is we have 3 operator agreements that were signed by City Council in 2019 before the establishment of the Energy and Environment Division. 33 well sites are regulated by the operator agreements. And then we don't do operator agreements anymore. We now have our oil and gas manual. That's Chapter 135 of City Code. And we have 4 well sites that are regulated under the OGM. And that was passed unanimously by City Council in 2021. Once the inspections or the permits are complete and operations begin, we have a robust inspection program that we implement. We inspect all well sites and pipeline appurtenances on a quarterly basis and others as needed. There are some areas that we do not have authority for, being a municipality. We do not have authority over the drilling of the wells or the rig or equipment that's used for that, the hydraulic fracturing process, the path or depth of the well underground, production pipes, production of the actual hydrocarbons, and again, any well whose surface location is outside legal city limits. All the wells that we have in Aurora currently are in Ward 2. You can see the producing well sites in red dots on the screen. Each of those sites has an average of about 8 wells. All the future sites that we know of based on operator agreements are north of I-70 in Ward 2. Civitas Resources is our main operator. They have 2 subsidiaries, Crestone Peak Resources and Axis Exploration. All of the producing wells and drilling wells are under their organization. Bison Oil and Gas is a new applicant. KP Kaufman Company has 1 shut-in well, and we do have 1 well that's in the orphan well program with ECMC. Production that's coming from the wells in Aurora, you can see it's been increasing since 2022. Natural gas is in red, the green is oil, and the blue is produced water. Taking those monthly values to daily values, those wells are producing about 73,000 MCF of natural gas per day, about 27,000 barrels of oil per day, and about 9,000 barrels of water per day. In addition to permitting fees and annual inspection fees, we also get mineral royalty payments to the city. The first 2 lines here are for minerals that are inside the city limits proper. Crestone Peak Resources, about $1 million to the city general fund over the last 12 months. The last 3 are actually in Weld County. These are properties that were purchased by Aurora Water for either water rights or surface use, and those go to the Aurora Water General Fund to offset rate increases, again, about $1 million there over the last 12 months. One of the questions that I get frequently is, what is the air emissions like? How is the oil and gas impacting the air emissions in Colorado? We've been using a third-party website called carbonmapper.org. We are not affiliated with them, but we have met with them to understand their methods. They track hydrocarbon emissions from satellites in space, and they're looking for large sources of emissions. And you can see on the map here, the Front Range, if you look at southern Weld County, each of those dots is a measurable point of hydrocarbon emissions, at least 100 kilograms per hour. And if you look into the Aurora area, we don't see any of those. So the landfills are producing some methane, but the oil and gas area, there's nothing there, which is good. We know there's some low-level emissions, but there's nothing on the major side. We think there's 3 reasons for this. First, our strong regulations. Second, our robust inspection program. And then third, most of our hydrocarbons are produced into pipelines directly, not into tanks on the surface. Talking about oil and gas, think of it like a water reservoir in the sense that it's actually inside the rock. It's not a pool or a cavity or cavern underneath the ground. It's actually inside the rock itself. In Aurora, all wells are producing from the Niobrara Shale Formation at a depth greater than 7,000 feet below the surface, so more than 1.5 miles. Shales have very low porosity and permeability, and historically they did not even produce when you drilled into them. It took the combination of two different technologies to make shales productive. Horizontal drilling is the first. Horizontal drilling is when you start on the surface and you drill straight down from the surface site, and then you curve the pipe so that the pipe is now parallel to the surface of the earth. Okay, and you might drill out several miles from that surface location. And then hydraulic fracturing, which is injecting water, sand, and various chemicals under pressure into a formation to create tiny cracks in the rock. When the pressure is released, most of the water flows back into the well while the sand stays behind to keep the cracks open. Now, to represent this visually, again, we've got a picture of a rig here set up on the surface. In Aurora, we have water aquifers, 4 of them, within the first 2,000 feet below the surface. Below that, there's another mile of impermeable rock. This is the Pierre Shale. There's no oil and gas in this shale. And then the Niobrara Shale at the bottom, near 8,000 feet of depth. So when you're drilling a well, the drilling process is like this. First, you drill the horizontal or the vertical well, and that's where you start from the surface. You drill straight down underneath the surface location. Then you turn the pipe and you drill the horizontal part of the well. And again, that can go out several miles. The next step is that you perforate the pipe, which means to put holes in it so you can actually connect the oil and gas that's outside into the pipe and then flow it to the surface. Next is the hydraulic fracturing process, flow back, and then finally the production stage, which can last for many decades. Talking about risk, we know there are risks associated with oil and gas operations. They tend to fall into 2 broad categories. The first is accidents and mistakes that can happen anywhere. The second is very location specific, and you have to look at the particulars of a location in order to understand what those risks are. We've done extensive research on that here in Aurora over the years, and we've kind of grouped these into categories. So thinking first of all about protection of the groundwater and aquifers, we've looked at the geology under and around the reservoir and through wards 2 and 6. We've looked at the history of wells drilled and fracked nearby in the same formation. Potential impact if surface spills of oil occur at a proposed well site. Then focusing on the Aurora Reservoir specifically, we've looked at the potential effects of any contaminants in the reservoir from a blowout that might happen at a well site, Aurora Water's ability to filter and treat contaminants in Aurora Reservoir, possible effect of vehicle traffic and dust on the reservoir, and then even more specifically, the dam itself with Aurora Reservoir. We went back over 40 years to look at the design standards of the dam, earthquake potential of fracking, potential effect on the Aurora Reservoir Dam. And then lastly, potential effect of fracking on residential and city structures and effect of surface vibrations from drilling on one of the treatment plants. So I've got a couple of slides here that I'll share that show some of the results of those reviews. The first is geology. This is a geological cross-section. I'm a licensed professional geologist. This goes from north of the city down through Aurora Reservoir. And what I see when I look at this is you look at the green layer in the middle, that's a shale, and it's very consistent from well to well. Okay, we don't see any large changes or jumps that would indicate faulting. We don't see that at all here. The geology is very consistent. Aurora Water has a very robust treatment process already in place. Marshall Brown's here this evening as well, if you have any questions for him. We get water from the mountain supplies. They're routed to 3 different treatment facilities. The water that's in Aurora Reservoir specifically is treated at the Benny treatment plant, and they use granular activated carbon as one of the methods that they treat there, GAC, and that removes all the BTEX compounds. BTEX is an acronym that stands for benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylenes. These are substances that are hydrocarbon in nature, and the community has asked questions about those. These are already filtered out of the water in the reservoir. So to the extent that any are in there today, they're already being filtered out with existing processes and existing methods. Aurora's water has always consistently met state and federal requirements. And importantly, the water from the mountains can actually be taken directly to treatment and bypass Aurora Reservoir completely if that was ever needed. Finally, we have the history. So in the last 10 years, we've had 203 wells that have already been drilled in Ward 2. You can see the white lines there on the screen. Those are those horizontal paths at 1.5 miles below the surface. All the neighborhoods that are listed have already been fracked, drilled under and fracked in the last 10 years. In this time, we've had no reports of earthquakes. We've had no reports of any surface vibrations or shaking. There's been no damage to foundations or any other damage. In fact, you can stand on the surface when these fracks are occurring and you don't feel anything at the surface. All right, we'll shift now to mineral leasing. Little background, the city owns various mineral interests in Colorado, both inside the city limits and outside, like in Weld County, which I mentioned earlier. Most mineral ownership is under city-owned surface property. Mineral ownership can come through purchase or through dedication by a developer during the development process. It's important to know the city does not proactively seek to lease our oil and gas minerals. We wait until someone comes to us. Now, in the past, cities were essentially forced to sign a lease if it was offered because they could not participate in the drilling of a well, which would mean to be a financial partner.
Excuse me, Jeffrey, city manager.
Senator, since you're talking on city-owned minerals, if you could, real briefly, if you don't have another slide on it, just talk about private property owners in terms of their mineral interest, in terms
Okay.
of, just briefly touch on that.
Yes, yep, I will cover that on
Okay,
the
good,
next
all right.
coming up slide. And they could not allow themselves to be forced pooled, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well, which also results in being a financial partner. State laws changed this, so cities do have choices now. We follow a standard leasing process. If we're requested to lease by an operator, we confirm the mineral ownership, we put together a bid package with all the details, we open a competitive bid process, we notify entities that have bid in the past, we post it on our webpage. Once we receive those bids, we review them in conjunction with real property in the city attorney's office. We confirm that the operator has leased more than 45% of the minerals in the drilling and spacing unit. We notify the winner, we get a bonus check in hand, we bring that to executive session. If it moves forward, then we go to a public meeting at the city council, and then if it is approved there, then the mayor would sign the lease. Now, when I talk about drilling and spacing units, DSUs, this is a very important concept because this is how all the wells in Aurora are functioning and how they're all producing. Okay, the DSU. So as I mentioned earlier, the horizontal wells can extend underground for up to 4 miles from the surface drilling location. Now, I've got an example here where the red polygon is a drilling and spacing unit, and this is 6 sections in this example, and this is very typical of Aurora. Some are 4 sections, some are 6 sections. This is 6 square miles, or almost 4,000 acres in size. The surface location would be there in the middle of the DSU. You can see that in the green polygon, and then the blue lines are the horizontal path of the wells underground. In this example, there's 8 going west, or right, and 8 going to the left. Now, typically in the area this size of 4,000 acres, there's many different mineral owners. The city may own minerals, there may be private mineral owners, the operators may own some minerals as well. All the owners who lease are joined together in a pool, and they share in the production from the entire DSU in proportion to their percent interest. Now, if a mineral owner does not sign a lease, and if the operator can lease more than 45% of the total minerals in the DSU, the non-signing owners can be forced pooled. This means that instead of leasing, they're forced to be a financial partner with the operator, and they share in the cost and they share in the profits according to their interest. And again, cities can no longer be forced pooled. And one of the questions I get is, now that cities have a choice, what effect does that have on the drilling of the wells? So let's look at some examples here. So in all of these examples I have, I've got the 4 slides, the orange would be unleased city minerals. Okay, so let's propose as a DSU that's proposed, wells are proposed from the surface location, and let's say the city owns 100% of the minerals here in the DSU, and the city chooses not to lease. The result would be no wells being drilled, because the city owns all the minerals, they get to make the decision, whoever owns the minerals, whether it's the city or someone else. If you own all the minerals inside the DSU, you get to make the choice on whether to drill or not. However, this situation doesn't exist anywhere in the city. There's no place where we have this many minerals all together in one place. So that's not a realistic example. So let's look at some more realistic examples. Okay, here's one where the city owns a small parcel near the end of the drilling unit, the DSU. And again, let's say we choose not to lease. What would happen in that case to the wells? Well, we've already seen this in other jurisdictions here in Colorado after the 2024 state law. What happens is that the operator will reconfigure the DSU, the shape of that. They'll exclude the local government minerals, and they won't drill their wells quite as far, but they don't produce the city's minerals. However, in this case, they're still drilling all the wells to the right, and they're still drilling all the wells to the left. They're just not drilling some of them quite as far. Now, do keep in mind that in this situation, there are likely other minerals that are being affected or impacted by the local government's decision. Okay, so there may be private individuals or families or businesses that own those minerals beyond ours, and they don't get to participate in the DSU either because of our decision. So just keep that to know that. All right, here's another example where the city owns a large parcel near the surface location. What happens here? Well, in this case, certainly the wells to the right are still going to be drilled because they're not impacted by the city minerals. Moving to the left, it's possible that might prevent the drilling of some of the wells, but not necessarily in every case. The operator might still choose to drill through our minerals but not produce them in order to get to the other side. Again, keep in mind that there are probably other mineral rights being impacted by that decision if we chose not to lease. Whether they could be accessed by another set of wells, that's another question that has to be decided.
Councilmember Jackson?
Based on this, I'm not an expert in this field, but how could they go through our section that would require construction, entering our property and things of that nature without our consent? And then are minerals as evenly distributed as section 6.5 or are there pockets and holes and things like that?
Great question. On your first question is, so keep in mind that the only surface activity on this map would be at the green polygon. Okay, so that's where all the surface equipment's occurring. The rig is set up there. Right. So the pipes are drilling straight down for 1.5 miles, and then they're turning sideways to go under our surface, if you will, by 1.5 miles. So there's no impact on our surface at all, or any of the surface in this area except for the green polygon. That's the only place where there's any surface activity.
But we would still own the stuff underneath, right?
We do own it, yes.
So how would they be able to enter through if we own it?
So
And
that's.
we don't consent,
Yes.
you blocked it off.
Right. Some states are starting to think about that, of whether or not that's mineral trespass or not. But there's no established Colorado law that establishes that as mineral trespass if they drill through, but they don't produce inside our acreage.
Okay, and then for the second piece,
Yes.
are minerals spread out pretty evenly, or?
So someone owns all the minerals everywhere in Colorado. Okay, so all the minerals are owned by someone.
Okay.
In some cases, they're owned by the person that owns the surface.
Okay.
In other cases, they're owned by a different entity.
Okay,
Okay, so but all the minerals are owned somewhere by someone. So everything inside this red polygon, all the minerals are owned by someone.
okay.
Councilmember Bergen?
All right, one more slide here.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Bergen.
Sure.
Clarifying statement on the ownership of the mineral rights, because you could be in a development and it could be that the developer retained the mineral rights and not, so the homeowner may not even own them.
That's correct. That would be an example of one person owning the surface and a different person owning the minerals underneath. Okay, one more example, and this is an example where the city might own multiple tracts, but they're very small, and they're spread throughout the drilling and spacing unit, and that happens routinely as well. Again, what happens if we choose not to lease? We've seen this before with other operations in other places, and what typically happens is they're just going to geosteer the wells around our tracks underground. Okay, so you can think of that track extending from the surface all the way down, to the center of the earth, essentially. And they're just gonna change the path of the well and go around those tracks and not access those minerals, not produce or perforate near those minerals. Again, this could have some impact on other people's minerals as well. So all of this brings us to a final slide here, which is a summary of choices for leasing. And there's essentially 3 choices when we bring this to you in executive session. First, we can accept the offer. That gets us the lease bonus, which is the upfront amount. Keep in mind that lease bonus gets retained even if the wells are not drilled. Okay, so that's the first step. And then if the wells are drilled and produced, we get royalties per the terms of the lease. Most of that's going to come in the first, 50% comes in the first 2 years. Okay, so you can see the graph there. The blue is the bonus amount up front, and then the first 12 months of royalty will be the most. The second year will be about half of year 1, and then it goes on down from there. Secondly, we can reject the offer. In that case, the city would not get any bonus or royalty income. The parcel cannot be forced pool per State Bill 24-185. But keep in mind, the minerals may not be accessible in the future. So especially in the example of those small little tracts spread throughout, it's not economically feasible to drill there again in the future. So these are sometimes one-time decisions that are being made. And the decision may impact other mineral owners. Finally, we could negotiate for better terms. Now, when we come to executive session, we have already run our competitive bid process. We've already brought you the best terms that we could get from that process. However, if council were to say, we like the idea of leasing, but we think we can get better terms, you can authorize us to go back and renegotiate with the winning bidder and potentially come back with different terms. That's all I have. I'm available for any questions.
Questions? Councilmember Horton.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Jeffrey, for the presentation. Going back to the what we have authority over and what we don't, it's listed path or depth of the well underground, and yet with the 2024 ruling, I'm confused around. There is we have authority of our minerals, so does that mean? I'm confused on like what does that mean in terms of if a contractor's coming in and our minerals that we don't want to lease, let's say as an example, it changes the path or the depth, right? So there is some give and pull in that.
So we're talking about two different.
I'm sorry, I'm confused around our authority with that when it comes to the path and depth of the well in relation to this new law that passed in 2024.
Understood. Thank you for the question, Councilmember. Two different areas of thought here. So the first is regulatory authority, okay? And for regulatory authority, we do not get to review or approve the path of the wells, okay? So that goes to the state. So the state reviews where they're going to drill the well underground exactly, how deep, how far, all that things. So those get reviewed by ECMC, and no local jurisdiction reviews that at all. We don't have regulatory authority to do that. Now, on the mineral side, that is something new that our decision might impact the location of the wells or how far they drill, but that's because of the unique authority that we have on the minerals that we don't have to lease. So if we choose not to lease, the operator may have to change the path of their wells, but that's not regulatory authority.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Thanks, Jeffrey. Great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Mayor Pro Tem.
I believe that's the end of our other items.
Items, yep.
So, under miscellaneous items, if we can discuss the FSIR report. In the meeting, there were some items that members did not agree upon and that we had said at that meeting that we would discuss here today.
And Mayor, I believe that it was inadvertently placed on the consent agenda, so it would be appropriate to review that now and pull that from the consent agenda, as Ms. Rogers has told me that it was a mistake that it was on the consent agenda, so it should have been discussed separately.
Okay, Liz?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Liz Rogers, Intergovernmental Relations Manager. So the committee met on Thursday, February 9th. We took positions on several bills. However, I'm happy to discuss any of those, but I want to focus on the one that Mayor Pro Tem Coombs referenced, which was Senate Bill 26005, Rights Violation and Immigration Enforcement Remedy. So details on the legislation can all be found in the backup. The committee voted on the bill, and the position did end in several ties, with the committee rejecting the staff recommended position of monitor and splitting the vote of support and oppose, each position receiving one vote. So staff is seeking clarification from council on what position to take on this legislation by a majority vote. And as a reminder, the city can take any of the 5 bill positions we have, including support, amend, oppose, monitor, and no position.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, Mayor. So the conversation in the committee was essentially that there's limited impact to city operations for the bill, and that's why the monitor position was recommended. However, we hear a lot from our constituents on this issue of the impact of ICE and potential rights violations. So as a legislative body with constituent responsibilities, I would propose that we take a position of support on the bill because the impact on our constituents is significant, even if it does not significantly impact city operations.
Liz, I'm sorry, could you go a little bit more detail on what the bill does?
Absolutely, Mayor. So Senate Bill 5, Rights Violation and Immigration Enforcement Remedy, creates a statutory cause of action for a person who is injured during a civil immigration enforcement action by another person under color of law who violates the Constitution when participating in such enforcement action. There has been an amendment on the bill, which was also included in the backup, that provided additional clarification on what that means. Staff has reviewed that amendment that had passed. We believe we understand the bill, and we are recommending a monitor position as this has limited impact.
A question for the city attorney, I mean, wouldn't the remedy for this have to be in federal court with federal law enforcement?
So we're going to be talking about this in an exec session later on for legal advice. So I don't want to get too far into it now. But this is a sovereignty issue, as you stated, Mayor, the difference between the federal and the state system. There would be significant barriers for this state law to be enforceable or constitutional against a federal agent who's acted within the scope of his or her duty.
Very well.
Mayor, Mayor, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Lawson.
So I went ahead and opposed the bill, but I'm just going to say it again publicly. So some of the reasons why I opposed the bill at the Pfizer meeting is because of the broad language, whether or not under color of law could potentially include municipal employees or contractors. That's something that needs to be looked at, and I think it will have further interpretation. Even the city does not participate in civil immigration enforcement, so I just think future claims could arise and require city resources to defend this. The 2-year statute of limitations allows for legal action that can involve the city indirectly. So I just think that this actually expands municipal exposure, and I would recommend an opposed position. That's the position that I presented at the Pfizer meeting. So just wanted to say that here.
Thank you. Councilmember Gardner.
Yeah, so we don't participate in civil immigration enforcement.
I think we should take a position. I think we should say at monitor, if we're going to use the argument that this impacts our constituents, then we should take a position on literally every single bill that goes in front of the legislature, because every bill that goes in front of the legislature will have an impact on our residents. This isn't a city issue, and so it's partisan political posturing. I think we should just stay at monitor because it doesn't impact us.
Further questions or comments? Councilmember Bergen and then Councilmember Jackson.
Do we have anybody from law enforcement here? Because I would like to know how this impacts law enforcement also.
I think our city attorney can opine on that.
But it doesn't. We don't.
I know we don't do, but.
Okay, city attorney has the floor right
So
now.
what specific question are you asking about whether?
Because we don't, well, so it's federal law that we're impeding, right, through this potentially, and we're not supposed to be
The law
doing.
is written around civil enforcement, and as the chief presented in public safety last week, we don't do civil law enforcement, or civil
criminal.
immigration enforcement.
Correct. So, and again, Liz, this Senate Bill 5 is just adding a cause of action against a federal agent, right, who would violate the rights of one of our citizens.
It's an agent, but again, APD does not enforce federal immigration laws in this state.
Correct. So it would not, again, we don't have any state law. We don't have any ability under federal law to enforce a civil immigration detainer or any statute. So this is, the way I read this bill, Senate Bill 5, this is targeting federal agents, federal ICE agents who are enforcing civil immigration law if they were to violate the rights of one of our citizens, to be able to sue them under state law. Is that correct, Liz?
Yes.
So, again, I don't see any impact on law enforcement per se, because we don't participate in 287G agreements. We don't do anything like that sort. So this is really targeting federal agents.
Okay. And then, but then what about the language on there about any person? What does that mean?
Whether under the color of law.
Yeah, under the color of law. What does that really mean?
So color of law is whether they're acting within the scope of their official duties. So that's what they're acting. It's not like like let's say a state officer, right? Let's say a city officer goes out and does immigration enforcement. That would not be under color of law because they don't have that authority, right? But this is stating if this is a person who's acting under their scope of their their job, then they're acting under color of law. So they would have protections that come associated with being an agent of the government.
Okay. And by the state, if the state passes this, is the state going to be sued by the federal government?
I think there's a high likelihood that if the state does pass this, then the District of Colorado could sue the state to state that this is a sovereignty issue, that this is not constitutional under our separation of powers.
All right, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, to the argument of, we'd have to look at all issues. I think the fact that, Aurora our population, it has a good chunk, almost probably growing over 30% of refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers, people that we can't even track in our census data, just makes this relevant as opposed to the general population. I think if we were to break down the demographics of our constituents, we would see why, I can understand why we would push this bill forward or push our support for this bill forward as a city of Aurora, a world in a city.
Councilmember Gardner.
Mayor, that's even all the more reason why we shouldn't, because the argument that's being made now is that this impacts 30% of our population. So by using that argument, something that impacts 100% of our population, we should be taking a position on, and that's not the case. The bottom line is, we don't have any role in this. This has nothing to do with us. This is not relevant to Aurora. And, we could argue relevancy on every piece of legislation, I guess, if we want to, and take a position on every piece of legislation. But otherwise, this is posturing. It's a waste of time.
Further comments or questions, Councilmember Bergen?
Well, and I kind of agree, doesn't pertain to us, so why do we shouldn't we just oppose it? Like, period, like, we shouldn't be monitoring it. We don't want it, because we have nothing to do with it.
Monitor means we don't take a position.
Please be recognized by the chair. Councilmember Gardner.
Mayor, yeah, monitor means we don't take a position. I don't, as a City of Aurora council member, I don't have a position on it. It's not any of my business.
But, okay, Mayor.
Okay, Councilmember Bergen.
I thought, Liz, could you just define monitor? Because I thought monitor was basically, you're not opposing, you're not agreeing, you're watching it, and then what? Then do you take a position? I mean, what's the point of monitor?
The monitor could certainly, it's relevant, but you're not for or against it, but you could switch at any time. So versus no position. So monitor is a position, but it's not decisive in terms of being for or against, but it's still a position. Yeah, Liz.
So this bill was brought forward at the request of Mayor Pro Tem Coombs. So on any bill that is brought forward by any council member, we always do a staff analysis. Considering this was a request, staff is fine with doing a monitor position on this bill, and council wanted more information on where this was going in terms of amendments or updates. But as the mayor said, and Councilmember Bergen, as you mentioned, monitor is just, we are watching the bill. We are not engaging in any support or opposition activities. We are just watching.
Okay. Further questions or comments, Mayor Pro Tem?
The idea that things related to immigration are not relevant to the city of Aurora is shocking and a little absurd, considering that the federal administration has targeted our city in their rhetoric, in their election campaigns, in their crackdowns, and we have a nice facility in our city. Maybe you all aren't getting contacted by the same constituents I am, who are saying, we want to know what you're doing to protect people regarding immigration. We want to know what you're doing about the GEO facility. These are not things that are irrelevant to our constituents who are actively engaged and interested in what we are doing about the fact that some of our neighbors are being taken without due process. We've already had this conversation before, so I don't know that we need to have it at length, but the idea that it's not relevant to our constituents is perhaps something, or our city is perhaps something you should take up with the constituents that contact us all the time about this issue.
Councilmember Gardner.
Yeah, I'm not going to let that straw man stand. I did not say it wasn't relevant to our constituents. What I said was it is not relevant to our role as a city council member. We are not involved in civil immigration enforcement. The federal government is. That is a position for them to take, and if these legislators want to do this, that's fine. But again, we are not involved in civil immigration enforcement, and so it is not something that is relevant to us as our role as city council members. However, if you want to make the argument that because immigration impacts some of our residents, then I'll say, let's go ahead and take a position on every single bill that comes into the legislature, because every single bill that comes to the legislature has a potential impact on our residents. So you can't have it both ways. If you're going to pick and choose which bills for political reasons, that's fine, but just say that, and don't throw out straw men.
Councilmember Hancock.
You know, I agree with Councilmember Gardner on this issue, and I think he said it very well. This is a straw man, and it has no legs. There are people who are also sending emails and letters and calling, saying that they are strongly in favor of us upholding the federal law and allowing our ICE agents to do their job. And so to have this be a conversation that the Aurora City Council takes on does not serve us. It does not serve our community, and it puts a big target on our back. Furthermore, we should not take a position on this other than to monitor at the very most.
Okay. Councilmember Wiles and Councilmember Horton.
One that said that we should support it, and my reasoning is because, one, we do have an ICE facility here in the city. Two, there are concerns whether or not APD is following state law or not. And if they're not breaking any laws, if they're not infringing on rights, then they should have nothing to worry about from this particular law. If they're doing their job as they should be, if they're following the Constitution, this is a non-issue. But there does need to be teeth to ensure that people are following the law, because it feels a bit like Wild West, people not following the law. And I think this was our legislators' attempt to ensure that state law is being followed within our state and giving a recourse if it's not.
Well, but it is federal law that we're talking about. Councilmember Berger.
Yeah, again, it's federal law, and the geo facility, unless they are in violation of zoning or a code enforcement issue, we don't have authority over their operations other than if they have a code enforcement violation. So again, it's not within our jurisdiction to, opine on federal law.
Further questions or comments? Councilmember Horton.
All good. Thanks, Mayor. I just want to emphasize my role as Ward 1 council member, where in my area we have a large number of individuals from a variety of backgrounds, both potentially undocumented or documented. And there was one individual man who was working at a house on 17th and Moline 2 weeks ago, was picked up by ICE agents. And he had to leave his truck, his work truck, and in the back of that truck was where he had his dog in there in his kennel. And so I stopped by about an hour after I found out, and I saw his son. His son had arrived. The ICE agents did allow his father to call him to come pick up the truck and the dog, and to express that that this is a federal issue, this is a state issue, I think is short-sighted, in that this is impacting the very individuals who call Aurora home, regardless of documentation status, and the lives that are overturned by overreach. And the resolution, a statement that part of this council that we passed in early January. This, I think, reinforces the accountability mechanisms that are needed when it comes to our expectations as city leadership of our federal government, and of making sure our state is taking a stance, which they are. So I am very much in support of this. I do think, as it goes throughout the process, things will change, and it will be, I hope, Liz, you can give us updates as it goes. But the rhetoric of this doesn't apply to us, or this is not our jurisdiction, is very short-sighted in terms of leadership of how this is impacting our very people living in our city.
Councilmember Bergen.
In that particular situation, were you able to affect the change because you were not able to stop a federal agent from detaining someone who is not in the country through legal means? So I don't know if that person had a warrant for his arrest or not.
No, it did not.
But you were not able to affect any change as a city council member. It had to do with the federal agency. So, I mean, that's a sad situation, but it is our law that you enter the country legally. And if they found probable cause to detain him, that's federal law.
May I respond?
Yeah, Councilmember Horton, then Councilmember Gardner.
Councilmember Bergen, I hear you in that logic. And the reality is that one, immigration system on a federal level is a web of complications, right? And secondly, I would say that the trust that people have of our customs of ICE changes based off of history and demographics. And I will confidently say this, that in a lot of communities in Ward 1, people do not trust our federal government to safely and with due process in mind execute immigration, civil enforcement in a way that is true to our Constitution. And so that is the hard line, right? Folks that do trust our federal government to do its job and those that don't. And I have to listen to the folks that, that I hear, like Councilmember Coombs said, is those that are reaching out, those are concerned, those who are telling stories of not only what's happening out in our streets, but also within the jail detention center. There are very concerning trends, and there's a trust in institutions to do their jobs, and there's also distrust that it's not happening.
Just one final.
Councilmember Bergen, then Councilmember Gardner, I'm sorry.
I mean, I think we should stay out of this personally, because it is a civil matter, not criminal. But any council member has a right to testify at the Capitol as an individual, not representing the city as well.
Okay, Councilmember Gardner.
Yeah, the level of gaslighting that's going on here is kind of disappointing. I don't hear anybody making the argument that these aren't important issues or that federal immigration law doesn't impact our residents. I haven't heard that once. What I have heard is, just like dozens and dozens of other state bills that may impact our residents or may not, that we don't take a position on because there is not a role for the city, and we don't take a position on those, the argument is being made we should not take a position on this. Again, sympathetic stories, it's awful, it's terrible, but it's not our business, just like dozens of other state bills that come before the legislature we don't take positions on. Nobody is saying that it's not terrible. Nobody is saying that federal immigration law isn't broken. All that is being said is we should take a monitor position because it is not our role, just like dozens of other bills that come before the legislature. And if we are going to start making the argument that any bill that might have an impact on our residents, we should take a position on, I don't think you're going to like the result of that, because we will spend hours and hours and hours and hours taking a position on bills that are only maybe somewhat relevant to the city of Aurora, but we have zero role in. So, because I'll push the issue. I really will. I'm being serious. I will bring up every bill for discussion that comes in front of the legislature for us to take a position on if we want to play this game. But this is not the role of the city. The role of the city is to take a monitor position and let the state and the federal government work it out.
But let me just say that this is, I think, the proper mechanism for this, and there is one. It's really a resolution because of the fact that this is a federal issue for which there's state legislation that's trying to usurp federal authority that I don't think is ever going to is going to survive the court's decision, because it's purely unconstitutional. I get they're making a statement, but I think they're using the wrong mechanism to make a statement, and members of this council can address federal issues via resolutions, and I think it's important to do so. I don't think these issues should be off limits. But we do have a broken immigration system, and both parties, I think, are at fault, and there will be a referendum on, I think, what ICE is doing in this November election on the federal side.
I thought we were
Councilmember.
no longer doing resolutions
No, I
on
think
federal
international.
issues.
I think international.
Just international
Yeah.
and not, okay, so any federal issue, we can just start
That's
doing
correct.
a million
By
resolutions.
by the current rule,
I'll
that's
bring
correct.
some forward as well.
That's correct. Further discussion? Those who support, are you looking at a monitor position, or are you looking at what? So those who are in favor of a support position for, what is the bill number?
Senate Bill 5.
For Senate Bill 5, please indicate to me your support.
We have folks online.
Councilmember Andrews?
Got a thumbs up.
Okay. I see this fact that the majority have arisen, then that will be the position. Are there any other, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes. There was also the other item I asked to be added to the agenda, which was, I believe, 1134, transparency in municipal court. And that we were also taking a monitor position on the argument that it doesn't significantly impact city operations, even though it clearly is relevant to city operations. And the reasons that I believe we should take a support rather than monitor position are, A, it clarifies that defense attorneys, including private and public defense attorneys, have access to discovery, and then that it also prohibits flat fee contracts for indigent defense, which is an issue that we've faced in our city for a pretty significant period of time, of attempting to privatize our public defense through a flat fee contract. And so those are relevant. Even if they are assessed as having minimal impact, they're relevant to our city and our city's operations.
If someone from staff could address how that impacts our courts.
I mean, Mayor Peace, City Attorney, I can speak on behalf of the people that when we're on one side of the court filing, but I will tell you that there are statutes already and rules in place that require my office to turn over discovery on criminal cases, which we comply with and we will continue to comply with. So I think what this legislation does is just reiterates that, right? That we shall have, make discovery available, and we'll do it. And as far as the flat fees go, that is an issue that many municipal courts are facing. How to pay.
I thought that was a settled question before, wasn't it? Wasn't there legislation before?
No, the legislation previously had it only extended to municipal courts that hear domestic violence cases. This extends it to all municipal courts. As you know, we do not currently. We have an in-house public defender, so it doesn't impact us from that standpoint.
It effectively says we can never go out, but on other cases besides domestic violence, correct?
It would
use
certainly,
private and use
it would,
contract
would
counsel.
certainly provide some strictures around that.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Horton, please be recognized.
Thanks, Mayor. Just can you clarify this exchange? I'm confused.
Sure. So we have an in-house public defender. We are one of the only municipalities in the entire state with a in-house municipal court public defender. A lot of other jurisdictions do contract out. There was a bill a few years ago that said that if you are a municipality that prosecutes domestic violence, you can't use flat fee. It's an interesting piece of legislation because the state Supreme Court sets hourly rates for what attorneys must be paid depending on the level of the case. And the case goes, the Supreme Court guidance actually goes further and said, and here's the number of hours you can spend on a case. Well, the last time I checked, a number of hours times an hourly rate
is a maximum flat rate.
Is a maximum flat rate. But That is not the way the law is written, although it does reference the Supreme Court Justice's guidance. Either way, it's a settled question. We have an in-house defender, and so it's...
In other words, it doesn't, sorry, Mayor, for the city of Aurora, because we are the only city that has a public defender, this really does not apply to us. And so that's, I think, when I was at the Pfizer hearing, that's why you guys said monitor, because this is one of those areas that it only affects Aurora this way, because we don't contract out like every
And then the other
city
piece
does.
it does talk about, it does require the ability to live stream court proceedings, which I think we already have the ability to do. So that's one of the things that, again, that's why we assumed a monitor position. Again, we could take a position on this, but we tend to try to reserve, oppose, and support for those items that really are rise to a priority level.
Further questions or comments? All those who wish to have a support position on what's the bill number again?
House Bill 261134. The current position as voted on by the Pfizer Committee is monitor, to note.
Is there, Mayor Pro Tem, what is your desire there?
It looked like Councilmember Jackson was going to speak, but,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was getting ready to vote.
oh, okay.
Councilmember Jackson?
Oh, well, did you want me to
Oh, go
comment
ahead.
further? Just
Go
that,
ahead.
right, currently, we're not affected by the prohibition on flat fees. However, the reason that that's true is because nobody responded to the RFP to bring us into a flat fee public defense system. It's still possible for a council to bring forward a flat fee system and for us to put it out to RFP and implement that. And there was an extensive amount of information, which I'm happy to forward to my colleagues, about the ways in which that does not result in good outcomes. Like, there are good reasons not to have flat fee contracts. And so this is the state legislature saying, yeah, we're not going to allow unequal justice by supporting flat fee contracts. It does not prohibit contracting out. It only prohibits contracting out for a flat fee.
Councilmember Horton, then Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you. Where's the bill at right now in the process?
Currently, the bill is still under consideration, and it will be up for committee and House Judiciary on the
Okay.
25th.
Okay, we need to wrap things up. Councilmember Bergen?
Well, I was going to say, can we just do a monitor for now? Because it's not affecting us, and, I mean, we would have, as a council, to make that determination to do the RFP. So you would have that ability to make a decision at that time.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, what's your direction? What do you want?
I would still
Okay.
argue for a support position.
All those in favor of support position, please identify yourself.
Well, there's no point. It's 6 always.
Okay, a majority have not arisen in support, so that will, it will remain monetary. Good job there, Councilmember Bergen. Anyway, we will remain monetary. We will now,
I'm sorry, Mayor, can I get clarification for what that vote was?
it was technically can't vote in this, but I was asking whether or not you wanted a support position.
What did it end up being?
So it's originally, it's a monitor out of
Okay.
Pfizer. It was 2-0 for monitor out of Pfizer.
Okay.
And so now it was brought forward to whether or not council as a whole wanted to change that position.
Okay.
And so what was just voted on was whether or not there was support to move it to a support.
Oh, okay. And was there?
I think it was, there was not enough, 6 did not raise their hands to the mayor
Okay.
to indicate there was a change in monitor.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, we will, let's see,
Like 7 minutes, bathroom break.
okay, we have a 7-minute break. We will resume at 4:40
Yes, sir.
PM in executive session.